It's census time, and we're answering your questions about the survey. That's today on this very special edition of Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstat, Cashman Equipment, and additional supporting sponsors.
As of March 12th, you can fill out the census online. The decennial survey takes count of every person in the nation. It's not just gathering information like age and race, it informs how federal dollars and political representation will be allocated. It's estimated every Nevadan who takes part in the census will bring $20,000 to our state. Now, that money will be used for roads, schools, and other vital programs. But some residents are hesitant to participate. To discuss the importance of the census, plus answer your questions about the survey, we are joined by Cecia Alvarado, Nevada State Director from Mi Familia Vota, Shondell Newsom, Chair of the Urban Chamber of Commerce's Executive Board, Scott Goldbranson, State Communications Director for AARP, Vita Lin, President and founder of the Asian Community Development Council, Taylor Patterson, Caucus Secretary for the American Indian Alaskan Native Caucus, and Brian Berman, Senior Partner Specialist and Team Lead for Census 2020. Well, thank you so much for being here. We have an absolute full table, but we also have an hour to have this discussion. It's extremely important, of course. I want to start with, it seems a very basic question, but it's actually not. And Taylor, maybe I'll just start with you. And this is a public question we got. Sell me on why I should fill out the census. Why is it so important to us?
So, number one, federal allocation. And I'm representing the Native American community. All of our community is founded upon that federal dollar. And I don't think that's unique to my community. Roads, schools, all of that stuff, we need to know who's in our community and how many people there are.
Can you speak a little bit more to that then? And so aside from just the federal dollars, it looks like that organizations like yours are actually using the data for other things. What are some of the applications you're using it for?
Definitely. So like I said, we don't have a lot of data on our Alaskan Natives, American Indians. It's a big, long name, but for those, as I would just call them, indigenous folks here in Nevada, a lot of times we have mixed race people, so they're counting themselves as African Americans, Latinx, so it's important to kind of identify that population and figure out how many, because there's been a lot of conflicting numbers I've heard. We're looking at roughly 60,000 Native Americans here in the state of Nevada, but other than the ones that are on reservations, we don't know where those people are.
Cecia Taylor mentioned Latinx also. I'm wondering, what are some of the real big reasons why a census count is so important in the Latinx community?
Okay, so aside being able to be counted so we can get the federal money that we need in our communities. For the Latinx community, education is so important. So we need to take into account that the money that we get through a federal dollar goes into early childhood education. It goes into our schools, business owners. It's part of our American dream to become a business owner. So for those Latinx folks that are thinking of opening a business, how the data from the census will help us be more successful and actually allocate the right data for each neighborhood, but also its representation. We know that the Latino community is considered one of our biggest minority groups, but we need more data. We also need a voice in our democracy. We need to make sure that an accurate count will give us that voice in our democracy as well.
And accurate count, voice, two very important things. You also hit upon businesses, business development. Chantel, I want to go to you. Let's talk a little bit more about this too. Let's go outside federal funding. Mm-hmm. Census, I understand, is used for starting new small businesses, but also bringing large corporations into our state.
Absolutely. So one of the things that the census does for us is gives us a solid count of how many small businesses and how many minority businesses. Like we are hearing that, the next count should be around 300,000. According to some of the numbers we've been hearing, it'll be about 300,000 small businesses in the state of Nevada. And we're already trending over a third of those being minority businesses. And roughly, you know, the challenge is those numbers, if they're not counted right, then we miss a lot of information, right? And I know recently, the previous numbers, there were about close to 9,000 Black-owned businesses, and that's, you know, that's roughly around, right around 4% of the small businesses, and so the challenge is understanding what dollars need to be allocated where the Nevada SBDC, SCORE, all of the different SBA programs, the Women Business Center, how do they help unless they understand the data that is associated with our small businesses?
And Shondell, SBDC, what is that?
This Nevada Small Business Development Center. So I just recently came from Washington D.C. to look at the allocations for the states. And that's another issue, right? Because that's how they allocate dollars through the SBA. For the Nevada SBDCs, they look at the state population and they allocate dollars that way. So one state or the other won't miss out unless they don't get counted.
And Shondell, we had you on a previous show. It was a while ago, but I remember we were talking about one of the big barriers of small business growth, especially in minority-owned business populations, is access to capital.
Absolutely,
Is
yes.
that directly related to census numbers?
Absolutely, yeah, because one of the things that when they look at resources nationwide for the Small Business Administration, they look at your census numbers. They look at how many minorities you have or how many small businesses you have, but also they look at the population. So federal funds are typically allocated based on the population. So that will help us when we want to get small business development dollars, and understanding that most minorities are first generation. So those small business development dollars are very, very important because they're not being taught by a previous generation. They're being taught by the SBA.
Right. Vida, we talked about business. We talked about business money here, bringing in a lot of economy. We talked about federal dollars also, but let's talk about county and municipal governments too. Sure. How are they using census?
So for our community, for the Asian community, one of the things that we have an issue is language. So when we do the census, it's important to get how many Chinese or how many Vietnamese or different language, because once you get language, we can put it into some of the applications, right? One of the questions I have quite often is like, when someone that's from another language and they get sick and they go to the doctor or hospital, how do they explain in their language, if they don't know that there's a huge Chinese community, where they go get help for any service they have? So for us, we use that data we use it a lot, not only for the health side, for education, even something simple as the DMV taking a test in different languages, or when you want to do voter registration in different languages. Until we get that data showing how big our community is, then we know what service we need. So for us, the census is so important for us.
And because we're talking about language, let's talk about that specifically on the census too. Brian, let's just ask that question. How many languages then are the census in?
Thank you for the question. The 2020 census is the most accessible census we've ever had. It's in English and 12 additional languages. As of right now, you can go on to 2020census.gov and you can take the census in the 13 most spoken languages in the country. We're also very excited that we have 59 language guides available beyond those 13 languages. So I had a question earlier today in Boulder City. A man said he has relatives who speak Armenian, and how can they learn about the census? Well, Armenian is one of those 59 languages. They can go online to 2020census.gov and get a language guide in Armenian. We're very excited about that.
If you speak a language that's outside of those 59 languages that we have, what kind of support do we have to make sure that we're able to either have translation or understand what the census questions are?
Thank you for the question. We have amazing community partners like the ACDC, for example, like Clark County School District, that has a lot of translation abilities. So if you have those kind of concerns, you can reach out to either my team or the Nevada Census team, and we will try to make that connection.
Vida, let's talk about that a little bit. So we have Asian American, Pacific Islander populations, different languages. Can they come to your organization or other community organizations to get help on the census then?
Yes, we do. So the census just recently set up a site for us at our center for help. Not only the one on Jones, our headquarter office, but also in Shanghai Plaza, where the service will be there. What we also have done with the census is bring not only Nevada, working about Nevada, but outside to get support. So from DC, we bring a large, diverse language to help with language, because when we talk about Asian, we're talking about over 2,000 different dialects or languages, right? So what we do is if we don't have the help here, we can reach out to other states and to get that support too, which is so important to build that.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's go back to the federal funding, Scott, and let's talk about our senior community here. At the top of the list for federal programs that are using the census dollars is Medicaid and Medicare. Beyond healthcare, though, how is the census then impacting our senior populations?
Well, it's a massive impact, Kip, because if you look at many things, as we age, we rely more and more on services in our community. For example, transportation. These dollars that come from the census are going to help us in both local, state transportation. And as our ballooning numbers of folks over 50 continue to pour into the state, that becomes more and more. You mentioned healthcare, including Medicaid, Medicare Part B, but also housing. Not only in Southern Nevada, where we continue to see rents rise at a rapid rate, also in Northern Nevada, they have a housing crisis. And much of the audience that is the team of people that are getting affected by this really are seniors, because they're getting priced out of places to live. This census allows us to make sure that that audience and that demographic is part and counted, so that those federal dollars come to us for housing aid, for transportation, because again, paratransit, we see paratransit here in Las Vegas has made huge progress over the last several years. We could see that progress stop if we're underrepresented. In fact, in the last census in Texas, there was an underreported population of seniors, about 1% underreported, and that was a $300 million funding difference for that state. So just to show you how significant it can be and how it can impact people who are on fixed incomes and who rely on others to do simple things like get to the doctor or go to the grocery store.
Absolutely, and let's put that into context. The number that's thrown around is $20,000, $2,000 a year, but from census to census, $20,000 per count. You start to do the math on that, and you can get up to millions, billions of dollars rather quickly. I'm wondering, let's go back to the senior population here and just talk a little bit about what are some of the big challenges in that population of getting an accurate count?
Well, first of all, it's number one is caregiving, actually. There's a lot of folks, especially when you start to look over 65, who don't care for themselves. They have a caregiver, whether it's a family member, a loved one, or a paid caregiver. For them, getting the census completed, they're going to also rely on somebody to help them with that. They're relying on someone to help them with everyday needs. And so to complete the census, they're going to rely on them too. So that is a big challenge. And that's one of the things and why the reason we're so involved in working with the partners around this table and with the U.S. Census Bureau to ensure that caregivers are aware of the census, making sure that those folks who they are caring for are counted accurately so that the services that they need are funded properly as well. So to me, that's one of the things. And then of course, fraud. And I know we'll talk a lot about that through all these communities today, but for us, it's a big issue. And we need to make sure that the most vulnerable people in our society are protected from fraud, because crooks and thieves don't sleep. They wait for opportunities like this to take advantage, and we're there to make sure that people know how to protect themselves.
And we will get to fraud, and please remind me if I don't get to it.
Okay, but I might add to that.
Yeah,
when
please.
it comes down to, we do some work with the RTC, the Regional Transportation Commission. So one of the things that I think is important is exactly what he's talking about, is that those services are impacted if it's undercounted, because that's how we as marketers, we look at the numbers. We look at how many people are we serving, does it make sense, what's the return on investment, all those dollars, because when you're dealing with government dollars, you have to make sure that those dollars are being accounted for accurately. So when board members and folks are looking at this from the county perspective, they are looking at those dollars that are invested in a certain community. So it's extremely important that we know how many people are using assisted paratransit, how many people are using the regular mode of transit, how many people actually in the valley where we can adjust some of the different modes of transportation.
And let's talk about caregivers. Brian, I have a question for you on that. If you are a senior living in a long-term giving facility, or potentially somebody with special needs that's in facilities as well, group homes and things like that, how exactly are you counted? Is it the home that's actually counted, the facility, or are you doing that on your own?
It's a great question. So folks that are living in assisted living facilities are counted in the operation that's called group quarters. Over the last 3 months, we have been making appointments all around Nevada, and this is the Nevada Partnership Team, with these organizations to schedule a time to come and enumerate the facility. So on March 30, March 31, and April 1, one of those days, whatever appointment the facility decided on, we are going to send a census employee out to have the residents in those facilities counted.
Taylor, I want to come back to you. We talked to Scott about some of the challenges in the senior population. Let's talk about American Indian and Alaska Natives here. What are some of the challenges in your population you're seeing that might lead to an undercount?
Yeah, so I think beginning that we all talked about is just sort of the why factor. And then once you get over that hurdle, it's really about government distrust at its core. And I know that's a huge issue among everybody right now. As the years go on, even in my short little life, people keep trusting the government less and less. But coming from a community that's had such issues, we'll put it that way, with the federal government and having a lot of our rights taken away by the federal government, it's hard to then go back and tell people, hey, you can trust these guys this time. So I think just getting people to understand that this is one of the situations where the government and the census is on our side.
I want to come back to this trust issue that we're talking about here. What kind of mechanisms are in place then to make sure that those that are coming to your door when you get to that census count portion where we actually have individuals physically coming to doors are actual census staff members?
It's such an important question. We're getting it a lot, but if I may take a step back before I answer, because most folks wouldn't see a census taker until mid-May, right? And we are only in the mid-March. So a lot of folks who are concerned about someone knocking on their door, the best way to avoid that is to self-respond to the census at 2020census.gov or at 800-330-2020.
Brian, is it 75% or so are self-response, right? That's the rate that last time we saw was about 75% are self-responding. So the door knockers towards the end of May, it seems to be, I think most people don't experience that, but many do in certain communities, correct?
Certainly do.
Yeah.
They certainly do. And I want to give you the information to empower our Nevada residents to know how to identify a census taker. Absolutely. But we have, if you respond to the census, because we're online now, our hope is that you won't have your door knocked on. Nice. So every census employee, so this is for most folks in mid-May, right? So if you don't respond, so that you've already gotten 4 postcards in the mail, you've already gotten the paper form in the mail, and for some reason you're just waiting. Yep. But you're going to fill it out. So, okay, so now a census taker has shown up at your door. How can you identify them? Well, every census employee has to wear a badge. Okay, so you can ask to see the badge. You can also verify the employees online. You can search by last name. You can search my last name, see if I still work there. You can also, there's a phone number you can check, 800-923-8282, and you can verify a census taker over the phone. That's so important for our seniors. So our census takers are going to be out from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So you might have a situation where perhaps one of our seniors gets a knock on the door at 6 p.m., but the folks at the 800 number aren't there because it's done in Ohio, I think. You can say to any census employee here, I want to make an appointment for you to come back tomorrow or in a couple days. And they will say, yes, sure, because I want to verify your information. And they will always do that for you.
Yep.
And I just want to underline too, the census will never call you, right? They're never going to email you or that kind of stuff. Because I think, and we have a big population of elders in our community too that are vulnerable to that sort of scam system. So the census will send you letters in the mail, right? But it'll be from an official census address or whatever you want to call it. But they're not going to call you, correct?
If I may, I don't mean to. They might call you in a very limited sense because they do ask for a phone number on the census form. That's how we check for duplicates.
Okay.
If multiple adults in the household submit multiple forms, we need to make sure that are there 5 people in the house or 10. So only in those limited scenarios would someone from the Bureau call, but that's only to verify that we have accurate information.
Okay.
No one will call you on the phone to take your census over the phone and to ask, like, and by the way, there is no financial information on the census form. This is so important for our seniors. No social security number, no checking account number, no credit card information. Anything like that is not a true census form.
And one of the key areas, of course, that brought a lot of fear, no citizenship questions as well.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. Vita, I want to come to you and let's talk a little bit about just for one thing, the challenges in the Asian American Pacific Islander community of being able to get a CAT. Let's start with that, please.
So we have everybody else's issue too, right? The mistrust, the safety issue, things like that. So we have to keep educating our community about that, right? So what we have done is we've been talking about the census since last year to our community. Every opportunity we talk about the census and educating, because education is the biggest piece, right? What we also have done, or what we have been doing, is putting in ethnic papers, a language they understand, in the language they understand about the census and what it does, right? So we have reached out to the media, we've gone to social media, we've gone to we send things out on WeChat, we'll send things out on different links that they have. And then working with the community. So we reach out with the Chinese community or the Korean Association, all the different groups, the Vietnamese group, to come together and say, this is what the census does for our community and how important, especially for our community because of the language that can help assist us, right?
What kind of questions are you getting? What kind of questions about, maybe some of the challenges, or, are you getting the same thing? You've already mentioned a lack of trust here.
Lack of trust. Everybody's like, we don't trust the government. Why do they want our information? And I always have to explain to us that, do you know the information the census asks is very simple. It's 9 if you're a single person, probably up to 12 questions, right? But you have more your information out in social media. You have more information in Facebook than you have the census asking you for. But if you understand what the census does for our community to bring money, it's not trying to find out who and what you're doing, but more of what do we need, how much money do we need for our state, and for what? Is it for students from K to 12? And if we don't get this right, we gotta wait another 10 years. And I don't know about you all, but I don't have another 10 years to keep waiting for our money to come in to help us for our community, especially now. So that educational piece is important, but trust is one thing, getting them educated is another thing. And even at a small meeting, I said, do you know how much money we're talking about? When we talk about 20,000 a day, okay, money for our community is important. Once you talk about money that we're not getting because of that, they kind of like, okay, now I'm paying attention. Then I can tell about everything else, right? But we have to tell them that the census question is very simple. And like I said, they ask less information than what information you already have outside.
And to that point, Brian, let's get right into the nitty-gritty here, and let's talk about the specific questions that are on the census. What are they?
Oh, you're going to test me, are you? Well, the census this year is only 9 questions long. It's even less if you have the ID that we're sending. Everyone is going to get a postcard in the mail with an ID that you can enter. And if you enter that, you'll have even less questions. You can also respond, though we would prefer that you use the ID. Please use the ID if you can. But if you do not have the postcard, you can respond online or over the phone without it. They're going to ask you your address. Right? They're going to ask you your name. They're going to ask you your age. Right? There's no algebra on here. You're not going to get stumped. You don't have to solve for X. They're going to ask if you own or rent your home. Right, they're going to ask your sex. They're going to ask your ethnicity. They're going to ask your race. You're going to go home.
And birthday.
And birthday.
And I do want to underline too the race question. This is the very first year that the census is going to have the place for us to put our actual federally recognized tribe. So it's not even just now that you can mark that you're Native American, but you can actually put your tribal affiliation down as well. So that's a really cool piece that's been added. Yeah.
That's good.
Interesting. On the race and ethnicity question then, so there are multiple races, multiple ethnicities that are chosen on both sides, is that correct?
So the ethnicity question is asking about Hispanic origin.
Okay.
And then on the race question, you can select as many choices as you want. So there's not just one race or another race, it's however you see yourself. And you can do, and it allows you to enter that in the way you see best.
Let's talk a little bit more specifically about immigration and citizenship status here, Cecilia. Again, in the Latinx community, what are some of the major concerns on taking the census related to immigration and citizenship status?
Yeah, having this conversation, we come to, we do share, like our communities do share the same concerns, distrust in government, and the immigration status too. So I just want to reassure the community that there will not be an immigration and a citizenship question on the census. That's one of the main concerns. It's about those families with mixed status. Do I disclose whether my a relative living in my house has it's not a U.S. citizen? Their concern is how to include them in the census and how to include them too. So we have to reassure our community. One, the census, if we distrust on the government, and I want to underline too, like this is the one time that the government is on our side. This is the one time that we need to make sure, because the census doesn't discriminate. It counts everyone from someone that's a day old all the way into our elders. It also doesn't ask you your immigration status. So this is the one opportunity we have to participate in something that is related to government, that immigration status don't matter. And this data and just the benefits of participating. So there is fear in our community, and there is fear because unfortunately there are some communication and rumors being spread online about the census. But we are trusted messengers. And I'm an immigrant myself. This is the second time that I participate in the census, and this is the one time that it's the whole process is easier. And I remember in 2010 it was a little more complex and more questions. So I understand their fear, but I'm also here to help and educate them.
Brian, that's a great question. Let's talk about non-citizens that might be living in a household. Are you counting non-citizens in the census, first off?
It's a great question. The census is non-political. That's exactly right. We just follow the Constitution. It's completely nonpartisan, non-political, and the Constitution requires us to count every whole person in the country. So we are counting every resident of the country, regardless of citizenship status.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
was
go ahead,
that
Sweetie. Go ahead.
the census is locked up for 72 years.
That's correct.
Right. So I say 72 years is locked up for 72 years, and only the Census Bureau can use it, right?
Correct.
So we have to remind them that, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's the biggest thing. And what's the fine if somebody released those information?
Oh, very severe. That's beyond the $250,000 fine. It's 5-year prison term, federal
And
prison.
5 years prison term.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of remind the community about how important that is.
Great point.
Because you're speaking to that, let's talk about the legality of actually participating in the census, Brian. It is not just an option. It is something that each individual that's living in this country should be doing. Is that correct?
Yes, it is required by law. That is correct.
Yeah. What are the penalties if you are not counted?
I do not know of the penalties offhand, but we don't really want to use deterrence to get people to respond to the census. This is about coming together as a community and getting the federal funding. If I wanted to go back and talk about children programs for a moment,
yes,
as we've talked about like Medicaid and highway construction, but the programs helping our children in Nevada that need our help the most, I'm talking about subsidized school lunch, subsidized school breakfast, Head Start, foster care grants, special needs grants. All of these are based on how many children we report to the Census Bureau every 10 years. And I like to make a special point of this. We missed 5 million children across the country in 2010. And here in Nevada and Clark County, we can't afford to do that.
Well, and that's a special point to make too, is we've seen the growth after the Great Recession. Of course, Southern Nevada recovered, and now we're seeing booming growth again. So we're getting an influx. I have small children at home that are in the schools. We're seeing an influx of kids and seniors, and with them coming in, that's why it's so important, because things have changed significantly over 10 years in Southern Nevada. And if we don't get everybody counted, we're going to be in that same situation. And it's going to be a dire situation, I think, in Southern Nevada.
I'm wondering, just in Nevada, around the table, why are we having this gap? Do we have any reasons in Nevada why we are just not counting children? Is it just because there's a lack of knowledge of that children should be counted?
I think there's a lack of knowledge sometimes, because even as we work with the census, we're learning, people may say, hey, I know I have these kids, but are they supposed to be counted? And maybe these kids are living with me and they're foster kids, are they supposed to be counted? So I think it goes back to education. I think a lot of people don't know what the right thing is to do, and the more we get out there and tell them what the right thing is to do, then they make it happen.
Gotcha. Yeah. I do have a public question related to this. I think we just answered it, but Brian, how old do you have to be counted in the census?
How old to be counted?
Yep.
Born on March 30, 2020, so one day.
Yeah.
March 31, excuse me.
Gotcha.
So one day old. So for folks that recently had a child, we want to make sure we want to count that child on the census, because those federal funding levels are going to get locked in for 10 years. We're going to get the same amount of funding for something like Head Start or subsidized school lunch for the next 10 years. So we've got to make sure that we have because we've gotten all those more kids in those schools.
And I'll say this, Kip, is that is a big deal with Head Start. I know Head Start has a lot of children who are eligible, but they always have a waiting list, and we don't have the proper funding. So that point of how many we miss is a big deal, and we need parents to understand that you're on a waiting list because we probably don't have the funding, and we probably didn't count all the children that existed in the first place.
Right,
Yeah.
and let's a local statistic here is about 67% of our under 5 population are in some form of informal care, not a formal care that is provided by Head Start programs. Correct.
Wow.
Yep. I'm sorry, Cecilia, do you have
No. Just to echo what he was saying about our the waiting list for this program, what the community needs to understand is that less money doesn't mean that they're going to allow less people to participate. We were going to have to, have programs strengthen federal money because if we're not counted, then we don't get the amount we need for this kind of programs that are so important in our communities. And there's more people are going to want to have, they're going to need access to this program. So, continue to emphasize it. The message, over and over again. We have been doing outreach in the high schools and talking with our high school students about the census. We've been doing it for over a year now too, talking about the census, because most of them were not counted during the 2010 census. And so for them to also understand and to go back home and educate their families and remind their families of the importance of participating in the census.
We got a whole bunch of coloring books too. So we're making sure kids know they need to be counted. So I think that's important, is like the whole family, like she said, the whole family understanding the importance of being counted. I mean, that's why I saw the bunch of coloring books being handed out. I said, that's brilliant, because now kids are like, oh, I need to be counted.
Well, and it's interesting, Brian, talking about things like school lunch programs and school breakfast programs. Just recently, I was at Rancho High School. The Raiders had an event. They were actually helping fund, it was National School Breakfast Week. And for me, it was eye-opening. I'm fortunate. My kids aren't having to go to school that early. I was shocked how many kids are at school early and how many need breakfast. And so for us, I think even if you don't have kids, the census is important. Those programs are important because there are kids out there. It's a civic responsibility, is the way I look at it, to make sure that not only are our needs kept as a community, but those that don't have the opportunities that we've had have be able to do that. And just eating breakfast and the impact that has on children and their academic performance is significant. So think about those little things as you get that census form in the mail.
Right. Let's talk about some of the specifics, some of the specific public questions that we've gotten, Brian. First off, equal joint custody of children. Who counts?
Interesting.
That's a good question.
I'm going to try to stump you.
That's fine. Well, we need to get the child counted, first and foremost. The parents need to work together and make sure that the child gets counted. We only need to count the child once in one of the households, but they need to work together and make a decision between themselves.
And you mentioned double counting before, and that is one of the reasons the census might actually reach out to you and make a phone call. How are you taking care of double counts? How common is something like that?
It's not that common. We have sophisticated algorithms. I always like to tell folks this is the 24th decennial census. We've been accounting for duplicates for a few years now. They attach all the responses to your home address, is how it works. Gotcha. So they're looking for multiple submissions on the same address with the same information on it. And that's going to be a big, time to make a phone call.
And because we talked a lot about trust, let's go back to just that phone call. What other reasons might the census be calling you that are legitimate reasons and questions?
Really, it's just about duplicates.
Just about
duplicates.
Yes,
is this information correct?
Yeah.
One thing about trust, Kit, before you move off from that, is actually in our population, when you look at seniors and folks over 50, especially 65, it's the opposite. They actually are too trusting. So that's where we see a lot of the fraud occur, is someone calls them. They get this all the time. They get it with Medicare fraud. They get it with Social Security fraud. Even our veterans get calls about their benefits and get taken advantage of. So I think that's the issue there too, is in our audience, we see our folks get taken advantage of because they are too trusting. So I think if you're a caregiver or you're someone who has aging relatives or friends or loved ones, is to make sure they understand that, hey, listen, if someone calls you, because they sound official and they say they're from the census, doesn't mean they are.
Is that the most common form of fraud is through phone calls?
It's through phone now, of course, electronic though too. So because one of the misnomers is that folks as they age are not technologically savvy. That is actually the opposite. Over 70, the numbers fall off, but between 50 and 65, everybody's doing what we're all doing. Everybody's on Facebook, everybody's doing email. So we see a lot of email, a lot of phishing scams. And I know, Brian, I'm sure you can speak to this. The census, you're seeing that as well. You're already seeing census fraud. It started early in the spring, and you double that up with tax fraud because of the time of the year, and our population is really under attack.
Brian, how can we make sure that the site is authentic when we are logging on to do the census?
Okay, this is the site address. That's the first step. Let's go to the right site address, 2020census.gov. You will see that lock icon on there, that security lock. Now you know you're on the secure website. I would also say for our senior, I want to make sure that they have the right phone number. Because no one's going to call them to take the census. So I think the best way to empower our seniors is to tell them, if you call the phone number 800-330-2020 and you respond in the next few weeks, then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
And so when they are, if that double counting situation happens, you mentioned when they come around, obviously they have badges, there's ways to verify. How can they verify over the phone that that is a true census worker?
Sure. So the phone number to verify, 800-923-8282. So the way I would recommend doing is ask the census employee for his or her name.
Okay.
And then you can verify that name over the phone. Is this person a census taker? And they will do that.
Okay. And is there a badge number or anything like that, or just first and last name works?
Now, first and last name will be able to look them up, because they'll be able to look them up by region.
Gotcha.
And then
okay.
that person also needs to have a badge. So
Okay.
that's the first question. May I see your census badge?
But if you're over the phone, if somebody calls you and says, oh, you were double counted, there was too many respondents or something like that, they would just have to say, like, oh, your first and last name, can I call you back? Can you call me back? That
absolutely.
sort of thing.
You could verify.
Okay.
That's a great
Gotcha.
idea.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Yes, great idea.
That's how she does it.
Yeah.
Call me back.
Let me call you back.
I want to come back to the online option here. I mean, we unfortunately are dealing with the coronavirus right now, and door to door might be more of a barrier here. Brian, let's talk specifically about the online process. First off, we haven't talked about the timeline yet. What is the timeline that you can take the census online?
So the census is live right now. It's starting here in March. 2020census.gov. You'll get a postcard in the mail this week. This is probably the week of the 12th. You will get 3 more postcards by mid-April. You will get the paper form if you haven't responded yet. If you do not respond to the paper form or online or over the phone, the door knockers will be out by mid-May in most neighborhoods here, and we have until the end of July to respond by phone or online.
And when can you respond by phone right away, since the census is open now?
Yes, I responded by phone. It was fun. I highly recommend it.
And while we were talking, my producer said she just took the census while we have been on air here. It took her about a minute to complete.
Wow. Wow.
Fast.
Wow.
Did we film this? No.
Let's talk more about the specifics then. Devices you can use is iPhone, iPad, mobile phones, desktop computers, what else?
Yes, 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 and yes.
All of those.
Yes.
No flip phone.
Certain browsers you should use, or anything more recommended, or something that's considered more safe?
The mainstream browsers are all great. Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, all great.
I did want to add, not to step on your toes,
Please.
it does have to be completed in one session though. And I think that's important. On the other side of security, not necessarily with scams, but with kind of keeping our information safe, because we are responding with personal information. I think the census has tried to work towards keeping our information as safe as possible, right?
We sure have.
Yeah.
You know what I love Vita said, and I'm going to use it. I just stole it from her. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You put all that on social media. Go to your profile and just answer the questions.
That's a great way to put it. And another, we also have to take into account those folks that don't have access maybe to a computer.
Yes.
And this is, well, again, when we come together, because, I know that some of the libraries will be offering,
Yes.
the service to help the community fill out their census. Is that correct?
Oh, the libraries, and I'm going to speak for just Clark County. The Clark County libraries, Henderson libraries, North Las Vegas libraries are amazing, amazing partners of the Census Bureau. Any resident in Nevada could visit any library of any of those 3 branches, and they sit down at the computer and take 10 minutes and fill it out. They're all active partners, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, and also Mi Familia Vota, the census, the Nevada census installed 2 computers, so they're not using our our devices, and so it's more secure. But they installed 2 computers in our office, and we're gonna have a census representative in our office with Familia Vota twice a week too, because I can't help someone fill out their census. Right. We just want to make sure that we are also making sure that the communities have access to it, but also the right people are helping them.
Right, and that's such a great point. And I that's why I like the phone numbers so much. So we have 15 unique phone numbers. The phone number in Spanish, I haven't given it yet, 844-468-2020. So for folks, you could put, if you have 2 computers set up at your organization to help people respond, you could put that phone number next to the computers. And if people have questions, they could call in. And then if they're struggling doing the form online, maybe they could just answer over the phone.
That's a great.
Believe it or not, we're running out of time. We've got less than 10 minutes left. And I just want to hit a couple questions we've gotten from the public about more specific, hard-to-count populations, if I could. And I wanted to start with this one. And this is about, since we've been talking about coronavirus, this is about coronavirus. I have a relative whose residence is in my household, but they're quarantined in another country right now because of COVID-19. How do I count them?
That person should be counted in that household if that person usually resides in that household. So that person doesn't need to be physically here to be counted by that person.
Great. Students, this is another big one too. If you are a student and we live in a community where we have a very large commuter population here, we don't have individuals living in dorms, how should they be counted? Is it the parents' house? If they're living in an apartment, is it their apartment? If they're moving around quite a bit, how are they counted as well?
This is so important for Southern Nevada. Most of our college students here in Southern Nevada do not live in dorms, so are not going to be counted through group quarters. That means almost every single college student in Southern Nevada needs to self-respond to the census, him or herself. If a person receives his or her own mail and they're at the residence, then that person needs to self-respond.
Gotcha.
So if a college student lives at home right now, like UNLV student lives at home with his parents, one of the 3 adults can fill out the census. That's fine. But if he lives at like a university apartment, he needs to. His parents cannot respond for him. He's going to need to respond for himself. And it's so important because Pell Grant funding, for example, comes from the census count, and we can't get more Pell Grant funding for our college students unless we.
I had a quick follow-up question because
please.
I spent 10 years in the Air Force here.
Oh, wonderful.
So if I was living in base housing, how would I be counted? Would I be counted in my home state or would I be counted in Nevada?
Your base would count you through group quarters.
Oh, okay.
We haven't talked a lot about rural populations here. We do have a lot of Nevadans here throughout the state that do not have addresses. Brian, how are they being counted?
We need them to self-respond. This is so important. We've got to reach out. I know this in the central part of the state, a lot of P.O. boxes. There's a worry that we might have difficulty in getting the paper form delivered to P.O. boxes. So we need to reach out through our community partners like we have at this table and let people know how easy it is to self-respond over the phone or online, because our rural communities absolutely need this funding too.
Yep.
And Kip, that's what we do. We do teletown halls. We do a lot of work in the rural areas of Nevada, and that's what we're doing is we're sending out active communications to them via electronic mail, email, also teletown halls, so that they hear and know to self-respond that some of them might be waiting for that form that might not come. And so we want to make sure that they're proactive and have ways to do that.
And we're partnering with the small business in the rural Nevada to provide them with information and to be a resource for them. So it's the community effort.
Yeah, Ceci, and a good point. We only have about 4 minutes, and I kind of wanted to take the rest of our time here and go around the table and talk about what you are individually doing and your organizations are doing to get the word out over the next couple months, and also plug any events or anything else that's going on. Cecilia, please.
Okay, thank you. So, Familia Vota, like I said, we're going to have 2 computers in our office for anyone that needs access to the internet to stop by and fill out their census. We're also going to be sending our census organizers out to rural Nevada to either host community events, partner with business owners so we can provide more information. We are doing a Pledge to Census campaign, and we're going to also be working with the community, making sure they understand the process, working with elected officials, working with our community partners to make sure that we are doing this together. Events right now with the uncertainty, as of right now, we are doing a community activation event on April 1st. If everything goes well, we'll have it outside of Cardenas, Eastern, and Sahara, and we'll have census partners there helping the community respond to the census.
Wonderful. Scott.
Well, we continue to communicate with all 340,000 members of AARP in the state of Nevada, but also the community in general. We are out at a lot of community events. Some of those have obviously been curtailed, but we're out doing that. So we're sending them mail. We also have, from a national basis, AARP set up an office to work directly with the census in Washington, D.C. So in all 50 states plus Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, any U.S. property, we are there making sure that people know what they can do, and first of all, trying to be a sentinel on the fraud issue, but also making sure to communicate how they can participate in the census, driving them back to the census website and to the phone numbers, and being there if they have questions as well. Our call centers throughout the United States are there as well. If they somehow get routed to us instead of the census, we're pointing them in the right direction to make sure. And really, for us in Nevada, the focus is to make sure Nevada Nevadans know how to self-report and get counted.
Those are great resources. Taylor, what do we have?
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of events through the Las Vegas Indian Center because it has been a place for our community to kind of centralize and gather, especially with our urban population here in Las Vegas. So we've been kind of doubling a community event / cultural event with census and then at the time caucus. So with that, of course, there is a lot of uncertainty with the health stuff right now, but we'll be holding events, potlucks and cultural gatherings, all different stuff. And our census partners have been so great about providing us with our own resources. Super quickly, I want to plug IndianCountryCounts.org. So if you are a Native American, Alaskan Native, those resources are specifically for our community, by our community. So there's a lot of cool, different specific information on that website.
That's great. Vita, what do we have planned?
Sure. So we've been plugging the whole census since last year during our college readiness program. But what we do is go to a lot of different groups, either the Chinese group, Asian groups, different Asian groups, and go to their events to talk about the census and partner with them. We also go to all the temple churches that they're part of too, make sure that they get their message out to their people. But we are continuing doing events. We have one this Saturday, but reaching out, especially not to forget the Asian Pacific Islander too, with their events that they have.
Absolutely. And Shondell.
Yeah, similar churches. Churches, big place. That's big in the African American community, is making sure we hit all the churches. We do trusted resources like Power 88, been around for 47 years, so that is a staple in the community. The Urban Chamber celebrating 40 years, so we basically try to make sure that we have information at all the different events. So it's trusted resources, and then more importantly, we tell them, as a family, discuss the census, talk about how it's important. I know when my parents were raising us up, they talked about things like voter registration and census. So your best trusted resource are your parents. So if parents sit around and say, hey, you know what, let's talk about this census. I know some of us used to have family meetings. I don't know if they do it anymore, but I think that's where you could get the best traction.
And a great way to bring the family meeting back to the table right here. Well, thank you for this meeting. We really appreciate it. It was an amazing discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As part of his efforts to bring federal dollars home, Governor Steve Sisolak created the Complete Count Committee. Chaired by Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall, this committee is tasked with reaching out to hard-to-count communities. It's estimated for every Nevadan that is not counted this year, our state will lose out on $20,000 over the next decade. A complete count would bring billions of dollars of federal money to our state. In a conversation with Governor Steve Sisolak, we explore how the census impacts our state. Well, we're here with Governor Sisolak. Governor, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We really
Thanks
appreciate it.
for the opportunity. Appreciate it. It's important issues for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's talk about that. One of your focuses is really looking at things through a child lens. We're looking at issues here in Nevada, how issues today are affecting the next generation of Nevadans. And I was hoping we could do the same when we're talking about the census and provide some context here on just how funding derived from the census is going to support children of Nevada.
Sure. Whatever the child participates in, you start with so many areas that the census funding affects. So it could be our schools, for our Title I schools and our free and reduced lunch programs. It could be our healthcare facilities, healthcare issues, whether it's building new hospitals, providing for Medicare, Medicaid, for their families and for them. It could be for infrastructure as it relates to transportation and roads and so forth and so on. So everything that we talk about as it relates to census, all of our federal funding that's derived as a result of our census participation and accuracy, ultimately affects everyone in Nevada, particularly our children.
And it's important to note that this is not just vulnerable populations. We're talking about everyone in Nevada, every child in Nevada.
We're talking about every single child in Nevada that lives here. That whether it's they go to school, they've got grandparents and parents and siblings and whatnot, and they're all impacted by the funding. If the funding is up, if we get our fair share, we can fund more projects appropriately. If we don't, the funding for these various issues suffers, and that's not a good thing for us.
And let's use something that's just talked about quite a bit in this state. If we're talking about maybe a low count, per pupil funding, is this something that if we have a low count is directly affecting what our funding is?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of federal funding is derived, our education funding is derived through the census, and that money goes directly into our schools. Now, when you're looking at $20,000 per person, so if a family of four fails to get counted, that's $80,000 that you're looking at that the state is going to lose out on over the course of 10 years. And that's an enormous amount of funding when you look at the overall population of what Nevada has. We're looking at upwards of potential $60 billion in federal funding coming to Nevada if we get, I think it's closer to 70, if we get an accurate count and everybody is counted and we receive the funds that are fair from the federal government.
And it's important to note that $20,000 ratio there. If we look at even an undercount of less than 0.5%, we're talking about billions of dollars here we're losing.
Oh, it's enormous. You know, when you extrapolate out the total dollar amount, it's absolutely incredibly large. And when you put it in the scope of one person, one individual person is $20,000. That's a lot of money. I mean, we can fund a lot, whether that's, you know, teacher salaries, whether it's, you know, better lunches for the kids, more nutritious lunches. It's some of our infrastructure improvements that need to be approved. It could be our, you know, our roads that need to be done, and building more schools, and providing for public safety. I mean, these are all issues that are derived as a result of our participation and collaboration with the federal government, and that's directly impacted by an accurate census count.
Absolutely. Let's talk about 10 years down the road now. A 10-year-old in 2020, when the census count is happening now, in 2030 is going to be 20. Yeah. They're going to be entering potentially college or the workforce here, two areas that are really critical and things you're focusing on, livable wages and access and affordability to college. How's the census affecting those two areas?
It's enormous, the cumulative effort that you get to that when you've got a 10-year-old now and you're not thinking necessarily, they're not thinking about going to college all the time. I was in a reading class today where I read to the students, my wife and I, and the first thing isn't college right now. They're worried about being in third grade or fourth grade. But when they get to college, if we have adequate funding, it provides for better facilities at our campuses. It provides for more research activity at our campuses, better instruction being delivered at our campuses. There aren't any areas really that they don't touch the federal funding. I mean, it's so all-inclusive that every area of our regular day-to-day lives, whether it's healthcare, it's infrastructure funding, it's public safety, it's education, whatever it might be, they're all funded one way or another to some extent by our federal funding.
132 federal programs are determined by census funding, I read. It's amazing. Let's talk about outside of federal funding, though. State governments, municipalities, are they using census data as well?
Oh, they all use census data. We use it first off to make sure we have adequate representation in Congress when we delegate, you know, the representatives to the House of Representatives, whether Nevada should or get another representative or doesn't get another representative. Last couple of censuses, we added some folks, which is great. And then the state, when they reapportion in terms of legislative seats, you know, where the Senate lines and the Assembly lines are drawn. And the same is true for city councils and school boards and county commissions and all those various opportunities. They all have to be done where it's fair for everybody, where everyone has equal and adequate representation. And that's what a census will provide us with, is that accurate information that we can use moving forward.
Let's talk about the business community, too. I understand the business community uses census data, too. You were one of the proponents of getting the Golden Knights here and the Raiders here. Are they using census data also?
They use census data on a daily basis, whether they use it to locate here, and that was something that was used with both the Golden Knights and the Raiders. What is the population? Then they have to extrapolate out in terms of how many of those people are going to be sports fans. Businesses use it to decide, okay, if we're going to open up another Denny's restaurant, where are you going to put that? And it's all done based on where populations, what we call rooftops, are located. And that's all derived by the accuracy of the census count. So businesses use it to make their planning and long-term decision making.
Private philanthropy, too. Corporations are giving money to organizations and nonprofits. They're using census data as well, as I understand it.
Absolutely, because what the philanthropic groups do is they want to deliver the money where the most need exists and where it'll have the most beneficial impact on those communities. And that's also information that can be derived from the census. Now, when they participate in the census, people need to understand this is totally confidential. That information is not going to be exchanged on an individual basis, but we can make group understandings in terms of where people are living, not the certain person, but where the general population is, in order to determine these other parameters that we're dealing with.
We're confronting potentially a major pandemic on our hands here with coronavirus. Emergency response funding, recovery funding.
Yeah,
these things the census is providing also.
They all are provided that way, and whether it's done through the federal government or at the state level, it helps us direct more accurately our resources in a way that we know that they will be the most beneficial, that will get the most bang for the buck, so to speak, by directing them where they're going to be needed to be prepared for these type of situations, that you know that, okay, if in fact there is an event that could be a problem, you're going to know how many people are located in a certain area and what resources and how much of those resources needed to be directed to deal with that situation.
Governor Sisolak, we're reaching March 12th, which is the first day of the count. For us as citizens, from governor to the Nevadans here, What should we take away? What's the one thing we need to know here?
The one thing that you need to know is the census happens every 10 years. It's something that we've been dealing with for centuries, the count of the people that live in our country. And every person counts. This is the time to stand up and make sure that you're counted, not just for yourself, but for the benefit of everybody. And, whether it's the person is a senior citizen and they're saying, well, I don't use the school, but we need that school funding because we get those children to stand up for senior healthcare facilities, and that's where the money goes. So all of the money needs to be allocated appropriately. And it's time that every Nevadan stand up and be counted. Be counted so that the money is delivered from the federal government. We get an accurate count, and Nevada will get all the money that we're entitled to, and that it will be fair on the national level.
Governor Sisolak, thank you so much for your time.
It's a
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thanks. Make sure you're counted this year.
Absolutely.
Participate
March
in
12th.
the census. Yeah,
March 12th. You got it.
We're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to learn more about anything we discussed today, please visit our website, vegaspbs.org/Nevada-Week. You can also find us on social media at Nevada Week. Also on our website, you'll find links to the Nevada Census 2020 page. That is where you can find the online census form. It takes just minutes to fill out, and as you've heard on this program, it will ensure you are represented in the federal budget for the next decade.
$433 million for roads and infrastructure.
$745 million for education.
$3.3 billion for healthcare services.
By filling out the 2020 Nevada Census, you will help inform funding decisions that can make important improvements to your community. Fill out your census form at census.nv.gov and be counted.
Be counted.
Be counted.
Be counted.
Be counted.
Nevada matters. Be counted. Visit census.nv.gov.